So this is how to add 21,352 email subscribers in 12 months using webinars. I'm a huge fan of webinars. I'll tell a little bit of the backstory of how I got into them, and hopefully give you guys some practical ideas of ways that you can implement webinars in your business. Just a quick show of hands, how many of you are financial advisors? Because this is like the financial advisor track. Okay, cool. How many of you have a blog also? Okay, cool, all right. So my goal for you is I want you to walk out of this room and commit to hosting your first webinar within the next 30 days. You could really do it in the next 5 days, believe it or not. It's a lot more manageable than you would think. Also in this presentation, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to talk about webinars can be very overwhelming, and it seems like there's a ton of stuff that you have to do. So I think that if you can keep it as simple as possible, just boil it down to its component parts, then you'd be surprised how manageable it can be. And there's a lot of the work that goes into webinars actually is one-time work, which is what's amazing. You know, we, especially in our businesses, a lot of times we're doing things over and over again, or we're reinventing the wheel. Well, with webinars, you can, if you do it the way that I advocate that you do, you can create something once and benefit from it for a long period of time. And I'm also going to share a 3-word phrase that will make your webinars 10 times more effective. So this is me at, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years old or something like that. I actually used to have red hair. It's been going gray in recent years. So I came from like a humble middle-class family, didn't have any special connections or anything like that. My family actually, my father got laid off 3 times when I was growing up. Each time we had to move 3,000 miles away to a different part of the country, away from family and friends. I just counted it up this morning, 6 different schools prior to my first day of high school. It taught me the importance of relationships, critically important. The fact that you guys are all here, you understand how important relationships are. Coming to something like this is one of the best things you can do for your business. I've had some amazing opportunities in my career. I've worked for presidents. I've met some amazing world-famous entrepreneurs. I have kind of an eclectic background and career, so I'm a former Clinton White House writer and aide in presidential letters and messages. I was an early employee of DreamWorks, working for Steven Spielberg, Jeffrey Katzenberg, David Geffen. I've been a speechwriter of the governor of California. I've worked in Silicon Valley, so kind of a weird eclectic mix of things. Now, today, I'm a recovering lawyer. I run smartbusinessrevolution.com. I help entrepreneurs to turn their relationships into revenues. I'm also the co-founder of a small group accountability and mastermind retreat business for entrepreneurs from the professional services who want to diversify their revenues and scale up, especially using things like webinars, using things like a podcast, that sort of thing. So when I started my own business, it was a roller coaster. So say yes if you can relate to the marketing, being stuck on the marketing hamster wheel. Yes, yes, anyone, you know. Limit on the amount you can charge, limit on the number of hours you can work per week. I wanted better clients, but I didn't know exactly how to go about getting them. And for years, I tried building my reputation as an expert, and I did everything. I went to Chamber of Commerce meetings, I went to networking events and cocktail parties, writing blog posts 2 to 3 times a week, building up social media channels. Who's done one or all of these things in attempting to build your reputation, right? I tried every single thing under the sun. During early 2012, I held my first webinars. So my early webinars were really rough. I had fewer than, I'm sure, 100 people on my email list. And all I did is I'd post about them on Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook or tell some people about it. Didn't get many people to register or show up. And I basically gave up. I gave up for 2 years. So between 2012 and 2014, I gave up. And I tried everything else to build a reputation, you know, SEO, building up social media channels, podcasting, guest blogging. I did a ton of guest blogging. Who's done guest blogging? You guys done guest blogging? How much effort does a guest post take? A lot, right? It takes a lot of effort. I mean, you have to create something new. You got to match their voice. You got to build a relationship to get in there in the first place. It takes a lot of effort. But in spite of that, during 2014, I went from 1,000 email subscribers to about 5,800. So I thought 6-fold increase. That's great. Sweet. I'll keep on doing this, you know, keep on doing it. So then beginning of 2015, first quarter of 2015, I started doing what I call collaborative webinars, and I doubled my list in 90 days, from 6,000 to 12,000. I thought, well, forget guest posting. I'm going to stop doing that. So I just doubled down on doing live webinars during 2015. I ended up doing 83 live webinars. I even created a course, which is very different from other courses about webinars out there. I thought there are a lot of courses out there that were about how to sell $1 million in info products in the next 7 days, and I thought this doesn't really resonate with me. People were asking me about how to do webinars, so I created a course that was about how to use webinars to build your reputation as an expert and authority in your field, which I thought was a different way of positioning it. I added 21,000 email subscribers during 2015, and the reason that I like webinars is because they're relationship building on rocket fuel. You could spend a lifetime going around to different Chamber of Commerce meetings, networking events, cocktail parties, things like that, meeting people one-to-one, but you're actually building relationships one-to-many when you use webinars. This is a screenshot from my email account. From under 1,000 subscribers to 27,000 plus in 20 months. I've done a webinar for Tony Robbins' company, Aweber, Contactually, a division of Salesforce.com, a bunch of thought leaders, Chris Brogan, Michael Port, people whose books I read and I admired from afar. A couple of years later, I'm doing webinars for their audience, and it can happen for you guys as well. I've been a speaker at conferences like this one, and I get emails like this. As a result of all of this, even though I don't really do much speaking, where they are inviting me to do speeches. So if you're interested in speaking more, getting on more stages, doing webinars is a great way to actually get on more physical stages, believe it or not. I even host my own live events. Anyone interested in doing your own live events? Yeah, well, doing a webinar is a great way to create your own live events. I've had people, one guy came twice from China to my live events. He met me through a webinar. All right, so what we're gonna cover is, first, the 7 myths holding you back from doing webinars. Second, why you should do webinars. Third, I'm going to do a quick case study on Jeff Rose. You guys probably have met him. He's around here. He's a financial advisor. And share a 3-step system for getting started with webinars and a 3-word phrase to make your webinars 10 times more effective, and then we'll do Q&A at the end. I have no clue how long this is going to go. It could be an hour and a half. It could be 45 minutes. I've never done it in this order before. I usually do it in a different order. So number 1, I need a product first. Number 2, I need to be an expert. Number 3, I need an email list. Number 4, I don't have time. Number 5, webinars are expensive. Number 6, it's too late. Number 7, the technology is difficult. So I want to debunk all of these myths for you. Number 1, I need a product first. You actually don't. And actually, I see a lot of people make a mistake where they start creating a webinar, start creating a product first before they've done a webinar, and they create something that people don't really want. And so it's a lot better to get started with webinars, get your feet wet, start gauging what the market wants from you, start building your list, and then create a product later. And actually, there are a lot of alternatives. One of the things you can do is you can actually rely on someone else's product. So Jeff did something really interesting. He took, you guys probably know of some companies like this. There are companies that will provide basically a complete package for you, marketing materials and a presentation. It's designed for a seminar, designed for an offline type of presentation. And you can take that material and sell their products at the end, so their life insurance products at the end. So you don't need to create any product. You're actually using someone else's product. It's completely done for you. So he took all that and he just did a webinar for it. So you can do something innovative like that. Number 2, I need to be an expert to do webinars. This is another big barrier that a lot of people think. I'm not enough of an expert. I'm not a PhD. I don't have awards behind my name or whatever, you know. My favorite example for this is my buddy Chandler Bolt. Now, he was a young guy, 21 years old, and mutual friend Chandler Bolt. And Chandler wrote a book while he was in college. He ends up doing really well, starts a 6-figure consulting practice based off of that book. He ends up taking that and then dropping out of college, and now he teaches people how to use books, how to create a best-selling book and then create a business behind it. So he's like 21, 22. How old is Chandler now? 23. Okay, he's 23 years old. He's got clients that are 20, 30, 40 years older than him. But that doesn't stop him from saying, okay, I'm not enough of an expert. The thing is, all you need to know is you need to know a little bit more about one narrow topic than the market is interested in knowing about, okay? If you know a little bit more about one narrow topic that you can teach to other people, that's enough to do a webinar. You don't need to be the world's foremost expert in everything having to do with this topic in order to do a webinar. So, and then also another good example, so a year ago I went on YouTube and I checked for the term webinar. This is September of last year, 1.8 million results. 2 months later, in November, 2.6 million results. So you can see how many people are really getting started, how many people are doing webinars right now. Number 3, I need an email list. Actually, you know, everyone starts with 0. You don't need an email list to get started. It's one of the most effective ways to actually build an email list, so I wouldn't let that be a barrier. You don't need a large email list in order to do webinars. Use what I call the warm-up strategy. So is anyone know who Roy Orbison is? I see some gray hair like me, and yeah, you guys know who he is. All right, so Roy Orbison needed a warm-up act to do a UK tour. So they look around, they find this up-and-coming band, these 4 young guys in this band that was starting to be popular. Yeah, you're right. It ended up being the Beatles. So the Beatles opened up for Roy Orbison, even though at the time they were really becoming a lot more popular than Roy Orbison was. But this happens historically in the music industry. So Lady Gaga, Queen, Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin opened for someone named Vanilla Fudge. I Googled this term, and I couldn't even find anything having to do with a band. That's how obscure they are now. So like, what it is the warm-up strategy is new and emerging bands. They build their audience by going on the road and touring with musical acts that have larger audiences. You build your audience, which is your prospect list, by leveraging larger audiences. Number 4, I don't have time. All right, so what's quick question, what's most time consuming for you in your business? It could be admin work, it could be acquiring new clients, networking, anyone? Anyone? Most time consuming? Admin, doing the actual work, fulfillment, yeah? Networking, research, anyone? There's a lot of stuff we have to do in our business, right? We're extremely strapped, okay? So follow what I call the Louis C.K. formula. If you're not from the US, Louis is a very popular comedian over the last couple of years. And so what good comedians and what keynote speakers do is they develop a handful of highly polished sets or speeches, and they deliver them over and over again to different audiences. This is highly time efficient, okay? Let me show you another way of thinking about this. So the time required to do a webinar. So basically every business breaks down this way. There's the lead generation component. You got to generate leads. You got to convert them into buyers, into clients, and then you got to do fulfillment on that work, okay? But as you know, there's a lot more to it than just that. So there's networking, business development, client development, all that stuff you have to do related to lead generation. Then for conversion and sales, you have to do intake calls, long-term nurturing, onboarding. And then fulfillment, you have to do the client work, you have customer service, returns, keeping clients happy. All right, we're exhausted. There's so much that you have to do. Well, the amazing thing about webinars is if you want, webinars can be a highly effective lead generation source, and then you can automate, outsource, or delegate some of the extra pieces for conversion and sales and fulfillment if you want to do it that way. Number 5, webinars are expensive. So you do need to pay for some things, but there's a lot you don't need to pay for. For example, you do need to pay for some webinar software. I'm going to show you that in a moment. You do need to pay for an email service. So you need an Aweber or MailChimp or something like that. Delegating to staff is maybe optional, but I do highly recommend that, helping you with setting up the actual webinar. And then you don't need to spend a bunch of money on Facebook ads. A lot of people initially, I'm going to go spend a bunch of money on Facebook ads. If you've never run Facebook ads before, not a good idea. You're just going to waste a bunch of money. Google AdWords, graphic designers, you can clearly tell from this presentation, I did not use a graphic designer, so you don't need to use a graphic designer. Number 6, it's too late to get started now. Well, actually, this is the world population connected to the internet. Here we are in 2016. We got about between 2 and 3 billion people connected to the internet. Over the next 4 to 5 years, that number is projected to triple. So that's a huge amount of demand that's going to be coming online. And they're not all just going to be surfing Facebook and watching cat videos on YouTube. They're actually going to be looking for information, seeking it out, and you can be there. You can be positioned to take advantage of this population of people who are coming online. And between 2010 and 2013, webinar viewing time actually increased from 38 minutes to 56 minutes on average. And I mentioned this just because there's a lot of misperceptions about webinars and their popularity of them. So number 7, the technology is difficult. All right, if you can drive a car, you can run a webinar. When I'm running a webinar, I'm looking at a PDF and I'm going click, 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 kind of like I am right now. Technology is not all that crazy. You can get used to it. Do not let the technology to choose be a barrier to just getting started. I talked to some people that, like, how long have you guys been thinking about doing a webinar? Raise your hand if it's been a year. Raise your hand if you've been thinking for 2 years. 3, anyone else? So people put off this decision for a long time, and oftentimes it's because, well, I don't know what software to use. Here's your answer. Okay, if you want free, here's free. If you want to spend a little bit more, you can buy back more of your time. If you spend a little bit more, you can buy even more of your time back. But spend a little bit more here, you can buy even more of your time. Okay, so YouTube Live, it used to be called Google Hangout on Air. They just moved it over recently. You can use something like Facebook Live or Periscope or Zoom. These are free services that you can use. I recommend just trying it out. Some of these other ones have 14, let's do questions at the end because I know there'll be a bunch of questions. And I'm happy to go back to this slide at that time. A lot of them do 14 or 30-day refund trial periods, so you can go try it out, and if you don't like it, you get your money back, or, so what, you paid for a month, it's not that much. Or, a refund period or something like that. All right, why webinars? Who here still does cold calling? Come on, admit it. Who here has done cold calling in the past? Oh, man, doesn't it suck? Oh, it's awful. So Baylor University did a study on cold calling. They had 50 real estate agents do 6,264 cold calls over a 2-week period, and that yielded 19 appointments. Is that an efficient use of your time? Heck no. This world is changing. And cold calling and a lot of the old school strategies that we used to use, the going out and trying to solicit people, don't work as well anymore. and you've got tools that allow you to have people come to you who are interested in what you have to say. So let's talk about some of the benefits of webinars. You can generate thousands of leads without spending a cent on advertising. You can increase your sales without having to be salesy. It can allow you to automate, outsource, and delegate a lot of the work that you do. You can grow a large email list, aka prospect list, and gain authority as an expert in your niche, in your field. You can make more sales in the least amount of time possible. It's high leverage. You can work remotely wherever you want, which is a really cool thing, even if it's for a short period of time. Maybe this summer you want to spend 2 weeks and go live in the south of France and be able to do a little work from there off on the side. It's a great thing to do that. You can also reach a global audience. How many here live in a town less than 10,000 people? Anyone live in a town? Mine has 9,000. You can reach a global audience, right, using webinars. This is one of my students, Barbara. She moved from the US to a 600-person town in Tasmania off the southern coast of Australia. You can run out of clients pretty quickly in a 600-person town, right? So she's got deep experience in business and digital marketing. One of the things that webinars can allow you to do is it can allow you to reach clients, and it can allow you to reach an audience far beyond your small town. I think that tools like webinars are going to really reinvent how our world develops, because we no longer need to live in just some small town. We can move. Of course, sometimes family gets in the way. John Teague, he said, last July I did an 80-20 audit in my business to see what was generating the money. Of the total revenue generated during the first 6 months of the year, 75% of it came from just 1.5% of the time I spent working on the business. What was the 1.5%? It was the time I spent doing webinars. Highly leveraged. Jeff Rose, goodfinancialsense.com, a financial advisor. So before webinars, he was holding live seminars. Who here has done live seminars before? They're hard, aren't they, right? So his goals were he wanted to sign up new clients beyond his small town. He lives in Carbondale, Illinois, down in southern Illinois. He wanted to create more recurring annual revenue. He wanted to spend less time and money acquiring new clients, and he wanted to spend more time with his wife, Mandy, who's also here this weekend, and their 4 young kids. He added 3 new clients with $2.6 million in assets from just one of his first webinars ever. Also generated 4 other qualified prospects with $4.3 million in investable assets. Let's compare the two, in-person seminar versus webinar. Cost him $7,000 plus to do an in-person seminar. You got to rent the room, you got to pay for some wine, you got to pay for some food, you got to get the word out, you got to use staff, you got to get people, direct them there, you got to get people to get a babysitter and come over at 5 o'clock in the evening. I mean, it's so difficult. His prospects were limited to just the local community rather than globally. Revenue $5,000 to $10,000. Webinars cost $200 to $300, and you don't even need to spend that amount because you can spend a lot less. He just delegated some of the work to his staff to set up the webinars. Time 2 to 3 hours. Prospects worldwide. Revenue $20,000 to $30,000. Much better result. If you go to webinar1k.com/Jeff, that'll redirect you to a blog post that Jeff wrote about the experience of doing this webinar that I'm talking about here. All right, so let's go through the 3-step system for getting started with webinars. I'm going pretty quickly through this material, so we'll probably have plenty of time for a Q&A, which is what I wanted to do anyways. Number 1, choose your monetization strategy. Number 2, create your presentation. Number 3, get people to register. That's it. Very simple, right? You can do this. Here's a hint. This is the most difficult piece. These other ones are not that difficult. You can do those pretty quickly. This other one, that one's difficult. So I'm going to talk about that one. All right. So when it comes to monetizing a new webinar, people typically fall into 3 categories. So number 1, you can use your own product or service. You probably all here have a product or a service. If you don't, you can use someone else's product or service. Or even if you do have your own product or service, you can use someone else's product or service. You can also get paid before the product exists. So what people ask me is, well, how do I know what product or service to sell? Maybe I have different products or services. I'm not exactly sure what I should sell on a webinar, how I should bundle it. Well, webinars are a great way to figure out what to sell. So this is a wedding photographer that just advertised on Twitter, and I'm sure he told everyone in his local area, free Q&A webinar. I'm just going to take questions. Grant Baldwin, who's also here, is one of the other speakers. One of his first couple webinars were just Q&A webinars. And this is a recording from YouTube of a financial advisor who did a webinar on long-term care solutions. You could do that. Or here's some other topics: how to choose a Roth IRA, how to minimize your taxes, everything you need to know about retirement income, Q&A about how to protect your assets. Pick one of these, whatever you think that your prospects are going to be most likely to be interested in, and then just get started and do it and see what the engagement is. See how many people register, see how many people show up, see how many people email you before and afterwards. See what the interest level is, and eventually you'll kind of figure out what people are really interested in. Another question that people ask is, how do I find someone else's product or service to sell? Well, word of mouth is a great one. Ask around. What else is there? A couple of marketplaces. ClickBank, CJ.com, which I saw was in the expo hall here here this weekend, sharesale.com. You can find some digital products that you can sell on those marketplaces, and you can use that to monetize your webinar. Another one you can do is you can approach a company you already use and recommend their product or service. So if they don't have like an affiliate program or something like that. How do we get paid to create a product? Now, someone could do a whole training on this. I'm not going to do a huge training on it. But you can sell a paid webinar training. So you could do a free webinar. At the end of that webinar, you say, listen, guys, it's been 60 minutes. We've done a lot here. I'm glad that I've been able to share a lot of information here. But there's only so much that we can cover in this period of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another advanced training a week from now, exact same time, exact same day. And if you'd like to do that, it's X amount of dollars. And here's what we're going to be covering in that. Number two, the Creative Live model. So you pay to save and watch later. So a lot of people go and they do a webinar and then they send out the recording for free. But you could also do the Creative Live model, which is basically people have to pay to be able to save it and watch it later. Or you can pre-sell a live pilot course, which is basically you say, you haven't created anything yet. You say, this is what I'm going to create, and then you tell people that you're going to create it, and then you float it out there, you do a webinar, and you get people to sign up, and then you go and do it. So number two is creating your presentation. I've got a free worksheet. If you go to webinar1k.com/presentation-structure, there's the worksheet and a video, and you can download it from right there. So the webinar formula that I use and that I think that you could use as well, it breaks down like this. There's three different areas. So there's the setup, the meat, and the follow-through. So in the setup, it's basically the first 10 to 15 slides. What you want to do is you want to establish why you're worth listening to. You know, what social proof do you have? What authority do you have on this topic? If they don't think you have authority on the topic, they're not going to stick around. So you want to make sure that you establish that early on. You also want to be expressly clear what you're going to be covering in that webinar. The last thing you want is for people to stick around the entire time under the faulty assumption that you're going to be teaching them something else. Turns out that they don't get what they want, they're going to be pissed. So you want to be absolutely clear in what you're going to be teaching them, what they're going to get out of that presentation. The second one is the meat. Now, I am not a believer at all in this kind of bait and switch stuff, old school marketing tactics that do not work. There's a big secret, and at the end, the secret is you got to buy my thing in order to get to what the secret is, the answer to the secret. That's BS. It doesn't work. So you really need to teach people something. The more practical, the better. The more applicable, the better. The faster they can apply it, the more they're going to believe that you have got some answers that you can actually help them. And then there's the follow-through, which is where you make some kind of offer at the end. For all of you, it might be a strategy session. Get on a strategy session with me. It might be I've got a course that I want to sell to you. It might be I've got a coaching program that I want to sell you. And a lot of people struggle with this idea of transitioning from the meat to the follow-through. How do I go from the training to the offer without sounding salesy? And it doesn't need to be that big a deal. You know, what I do in my Webinar 1K course is I just say, look, we've covered a lot of material here, but there are a bunch of other things that I haven't been able to touch on, and I just want to mention some of those briefly, and then I go through and I mention what those are. And then I say, look, I spent a long time figuring out this process. If you guys would like a quicker and easier solution, I'd like to present to you a possibility for you, and that is my course. And that's it. End of transition. Number three, getting people to register. I mentioned earlier, this is the most tricky part. This is the most difficult part. Well, the million-dollar question is, well, how do I get people to register and show up, especially if I don't have a big email list, especially if I don't have a big following, social media, or anything like that? Well, the answer is collaborative partners. I'm a huge fan of collaborative partners. One of them sitting in the back of the room, Grant Baldwin, right there. We've done some webinars together, and it's a great strategy for growing your business, okay? And the question is, well, how do you find partners, okay? And this is just some screenshots from my email account, some different occasions over the last couple of years where I got 1,500 email subscribers in a day, and I wasn't even doing anything on that particular day. It might have been a weekend. The reason is because someone else or some other company or something like that was actually out promoting a webinar of mine that was coming up, and these email subscribers were coming into my account. So any of you who have done guest posting before and gotten like 4 email subscribers out of it after busting your hump putting that guest post together? You know, I mean, I've been there. I know what it's like. It sucks, right? So doing a webinar and you get a result like this, you're just absolutely thrilled out of your mind, you know? So there are different kinds of collaborative partners. So you can think very creatively about these. Companies, software businesses, universities, maybe your alma mater, LinkedIn groups, starting your own LinkedIn groups, authors, speakers, thought leaders, individuals who have an audience or a following. Everyone in this room potentially could be a partner. Coming to an event like this is a great way to find potential partners. So the question becomes, well, how do I quickly and easily find partners who I can do a webinar for, especially if I'm not at this conference or if I'm back at home or I'm looking for other partners? Well, let me give you 2 sources, all right? Udemy. Anyone, you guys heard of Udemy? It's an online learning platform. There's a bunch of different courses on there. All right, so let's do a hypothetical. Let's hypothetically, I don't know, pick like financial advisor. So pretend like you're a financial advisor and you want to do a little bit of research on what is out there. So you take the term personal finance, for example. I just did this morning, and I searched on Udemy, and these are some of the results that came up. The Ultimate Guide to Personal Finance and Saving Thousands. Personal Finance, Thinking Like the Rich and Acting Now. Personal Finance Management Skills for Young Adults. It's extremely helpful because you're seeing what's out there. You're seeing what the market has already created. You're seeing innovative thought leaders and course creators who are innovative enough that they're thinking about creating a course on a relatively new platform. So those are forward-thinking types of people. Now let's go a little bit further. Let's take a look at this one at the bottom here. It sells for $200. It's got 47 ratings. We go to that one. Check this out. 11,000 students enrolled in this one. So this person, who is Matt Bernstein, who might be here, for all I know, is Matt Bernstein here? Or maybe he's here at this conference, I don't know. Matt Bernstein has created a course that's sold to 11,000 students. That is someone you want to get to know. You know, that's someone you want to reach out to and get to know because they have an audience, and potentially you have some kind of training that you could do for his audience. And I'm sure if it's of value, then you can develop a relationship with this person and you can do a presentation for him. Another great source of partners is Amazon. So Amazon's been around for a long time. Books have been around for a long time, a lot longer than webinars are. So if you find information on Amazon, if you find material on Amazon, it might just be that no one's created a webinar on it yet, okay? Whenever you have new technology, a new platform that comes along like webinars, it takes a while for information course creators, product creators to catch up. If you think of like, I know there was an exhibitor here that was talking about virtual reality. I was thinking about virtual reality, you know, like how many virtual reality content creators are out there right now? Probably not a lot, right? You know, I mean, that's an area that will be developing over the next probably 20 years or so. So this is a case study. This is not a financial advisor, but I think this is helpful because this is a very difficult, very tricky example. This was a student of mine, David Abbott. He did exit planning for business owners in their 50s and 60s. He lives in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Did I pronounce that correctly? Anyone know? Murphy? Yes? Okay, cool. And one of the things he told me that was really interesting, he said, the clients that I need to find don't even know they need to hire me yet. And they need to hire me 5 to 6 years before they realize they need me. How hard is that? I mean, how many different Chamber of Commerce meetings would you have to go to in order to find those people and convince them that they need your services? It could take a lifetime. So very, very tricky situation. How do you find that audience and how do you find those clients, right? So you can start with Amazon. You just search for a term like exit planning. You see what's out there. You see, you know, finish big, business exit planning, walk away wealthy. You see this bars of gold here. It gives you some ideas about positioning, gives you an idea about what's out there, what's in the marketplace. And the big question people ask me is, well, why would you reach out to like an author thought leader who's writing about the same topic as you? Wouldn't they be worried about competition? Why would they ever want to host a webinar of yours? Why would they ever let you do a webinar for their audience? Because wouldn't they view you as a competitor? Well, there's actually a number of reasons why competition, they might want to promote a competitor. And one is, I believe that traditional notions of competition do not exist when demand is increasing exponentially as it is over the next 4 to 5 years, with 3 times the number of people coming online in the internet over the next 4 to 5 years. Second one is David could present a training on a different narrow topic of value to their audience. There was a guy I met the other night, I don't think I see him here. He focused on expats living abroad. Oh, there you are. There you are. What? Tell me what your focus is. Expats living abroad.
Cross-border, yeah, cross-border wealth.
Cross-border. That's a very narrow, interesting little niche, isn't it? Right? So he could go to someone else who's got an audience of, you know, prospects, and because he's focusing on that narrow little specific little topic, it's not going to be in competition with that person because they don't actually focus on that. Different business models. So perhaps the authors that you're reaching out to, they don't do any consulting or they don't care about client work. Maybe they only make their money from speaking fees. They only make their money from selling books. So they don't care about you taking a client because there's not going to be any, you know, skin off their back. And then there's the power of reciprocity. So if David delivers value first, they will want to reciprocate. So let's take it a little further. So I gave you this example. So let's research some of these authors and see where we go with that. See if we can find a prospect. Let's start with Koos Kruger. He's from Australia. And let's search that term. So we Google Koos Kruger, and boom, we find this website, Business Exit Companion. Now, well, the good news is he is really focused on business exit, right? That is his focus. What you don't want is an author who's written 20 different books on 20 different topics, and they're not really focused on that one narrow topic. So that's good news. But what we don't know is this just like a pamphlet? Is this just like a brochure? There's no following behind it. There's no audience. He hasn't built any kind of community or anything like that. So one of the ways that you can find out is by going to social. So he makes it very easy. You can click on the social links up here, go over to his Facebook page, branded business exit companion. That's great news. Very good. So he is concerned about putting himself out in the world and people following him for that. He's got 131 people who like that Facebook page. Okay, that's not really promising. That's not a huge number of people. But there's a silver lining. So like 17 hours earlier, he shared an article about exit planning. He has only 131 people that are following him. That gives you an opportunity to get on the radar screen of this thought leader, which is not always easy, especially as thought leaders escalate and they become bigger and they get a bigger and bigger audience. So you can like it, you can say, hey, great post down here. He's going to notice that because he doesn't have a huge amount of people following that. Then you go and you open up the article, take a look at the article, and then maybe share it on Twitter. So we go over to Twitter, going to add his Twitter handle so that he knows that we shared it, because otherwise he won't see it, okay? Then I go over to his Twitter page. Great, Business Exit Companion. Also, check this out, 32,000 followers. Interested in exit planning. You could spend a lifetime going to Chamber of Commerce meetings and you'd never find an audience that hyper-focused on that one topic. So a little bit of research, and then you use a webinar to back it up, a lot more effective strategy. All right, I mentioned the 3-word phrase that will give you 10 times greater results. Recap strategy session. Recap strategy session. What do I mean? So let's pretend David and Kuz get to know each other. Okay? They meet each other. You know, David reaches out to Kuz, gets to know him, delivers value to him. They get to know each other, and then they do a webinar for each other. I'm a firm believer in a rising tide floats all boats. So you promote each other, you help each other, you both of your audiences grow. After the webinar, you do a recap strategy session. So here's what you do. You suggest a 15-minute meeting after your webinar. Both of you should be in front of your computers, not driving, not walking, or anything like that. You want to get feedback on how to improve your presentation, always important. And then you proactively suggest people you can introduce the other person to. I do a ton of introductions. It's one of the best things I've done for my business. You should all do introductions. You get suggestions of who you can present your webinar to, who they know, who they think, after having seen your webinar, who they think you could do a presentation for, and who would be a good fit for your audience. All right, so you guys, I'm about to wrap up. You guys are probably wondering, can this work for me, right? Can this work for my situation? Webinars can work in nearly any industry. If you can sell to one person, you can sell it to 100 people using webinars. Now, Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. I love that quote. Next steps. I talked about a lot here. 1, choose the webinar software. I can go back and show you guys that slide again. I know you had a question about that. Think about a frequently asked question from your customers, your clients, that you could maybe focus on your first webinar, just do kind of Q&A and talk about it a little bit. Brainstorm who you can do a webinar for. Hopefully someone you met here would be a good fit. And you can also download my ebook, webinar1k.com/free ebook. It's got some more additional advice on there. Okay? Here's how to contact me. And we'll just move on to questions, if anyone has any questions. Yeah?
So if you did 83 webinars, how many went to your own list?
Maybe 10. Yeah.
I was going to ask about burnout, but that's not.
Yeah, so the funny thing was, during 2014, I did a lot of webinars to my own list. I started, I probably had about 2,000 subscribers, and I would do webinars. And I was developing a course, and so what I do is I compress down the timeline. So on Monday, I would announce the webinar. I'd send another email on Wednesday announcing it, and then I'd do the webinar on Wednesday, and then I'd send some follow-up emails Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and I'd close enrollment in the class, and then I'd evaluate how that webinar did. And then the next week, I'd do another topic, slightly different topic. I would change the presentation slightly, but not too dramatically. And I'd say at the beginning of the presentation, if any of you were on my webinar last week, which doesn't often happen because people are busy, sometimes they can come, sometimes they can't. And I'd say, if you were on this last presentation, this is going to be slightly different, but a lot of the material is going to be the same. And then I'd do a similar presentation. And then I'd evaluate each week how it went. I'd tweak a little thing each time. And that was exhausting because I have to draft a new email on Monday, draft a new email for Wednesday, do a slightly different presentation, and at the same time, I'm hammering my list over and over again, and results will go down. And then eventually, then in 2015, I started doing the webinars externally. I no longer hammered my list on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. That actually opened up opportunities. This was unexpected to me. That opened up opportunities for me to then bring in others who to do presentations to my audience. And that helped grow my list even faster, because then I bring in guys like Grant who come in and do a training on speaking, how to become a professional speaker. And it was not expertise that I had, but it was some of my audience was interested in consuming that information. And at the same time, I'm doing external webinars, but I'm not burning out my audience because I'm not telling them about the external webinars. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah.
What's the biggest difference between Webinar Ninja and Teachable? Is Teachable just for courses, or can you use that the same way?
I haven't used Teachable, but I believe it's just for courses. Anyone else here use Teachable? Yeah, it's just a course platform, yeah. So Webinar Ninja is a webinar platform. Yeah, you could use Webinar Ninja to deliver a live course, but it's not really like a course, a course platform type of thing, yeah.
Any reason you mentioned Join Me or GoTo? Do you have issues with those platforms?
Yeah, everyone has their preferences. I've used GoToWebinar before. I don't think it's good for beginners. It's like $100 or it's like $80 a month for 100, attendees or something like that. It just seems like very expensive. I also find it's very glitchy. Most of the people I know who are using GoToWebinar have been using it for 5 or 6 years, and they're, grandfathered in at some lower plan, and they've been using it for so long, they just know how to use it. They're like, yeah, I should move, but I just, I'm used to it. So I find it, I believe that GoToWebinar is the Microsoft of the webinar software field. They were the market leader for a long time. They failed to innovate. Now other startups are coming along, and they're innovating. And GoToWebinar even, people have gotten used to being able to chat amongst each other on webinars, I find. And so sometimes I do external webinars where they want to host it on their platform using GoToWebinar, and I do it, and people say in the chat, how do I see the chat? And they don't even have that functionality, they could innovate and create, so I'm not a big fan of theirs, so basically. What's that?
I missed it. What do you like?
Let me go back to the, let me see if I can go back to the slide that had the options on it. So right now I'm using Webinar Jam. Another one I'm a fan of is Webinar Ninja by my buddy Omar Zenhom. It's got a couple of problems right now, though, because I'm using Infusionsoft, and it doesn't integrate with Infusionsoft fully. Where is it? Was it here? There it is. There we go. What I would recommend starting with, Zoom is a great option. I haven't actually used it for a webinar yet, but I see more and more people using Zoom. They have a free up to 50 attendees plan, so that's great for getting started. And then you can pay a little bit more. I don't know if it's $19 a month or something like that. The other thing I did when I was getting started was it used to be called Google Hangout on Air, embedded on a lead page with Chatwing as your chat. If you just Google lead pages, how to build a webinar or something like that, lead pages has got a tutorial on how to put together a webinar. But what I'd really recommend is if you're making a decent income right now and you're not trying to completely bootstrap it, then use something like a Webinar Jam, which will save you a ton of time in putting those pieces together, and you can literally duplicate a webinar. The other thing that is interesting about Webinar Jam is it allows you to take an existing webinar and you can transfer it over to their webinar platform to make an evergreen version of it. Now, I don't really recommend, if you're just getting started with webinars, doing evergreen webinars right from the get-go, because imagine if just doing webinars, it's like speaking, like getting on stage. First time you get on stage, you're going to be awful, right? And then you get better over time. Webinars are the same way, and you can improve your conversion percentage. You can improve the quality of the experience. So I recommend you do live webinars for a while, get experience under your belt, and then eventually you can do something like that. And then evergreen webinars are. You guys know what that term means? You know what that term means? Okay, so evergreen webinars is like it seems as if it's live. So sometimes when you're on a webinar, it's hard to tell, right? Unless the person says, like, this is today's date, or Donald Trump did this ridiculous thing in the news today, or something that's timely, right? Then they would know what is, why it's going on, or they would know that it's actually live and not pre-recorded. But there are really innovative ways that business owners are using evergreen webinars in their businesses. So it's something that you can think about down the line. I just wouldn't recommend doing it right away. Yes?
So I've got Webinar Jam, and what I wanted to ask you is, do you use the opt-in on the Webinar Jam platform, or do you like lead pages better?
Yeah, I'm not too crazy about their webinar registration templates. I think
Use their customer.
we do both. We do both. We do both. Sometimes we set up it in lead pages, and sometimes we do it in Webinar Jam.
Because they have that CRM function inside of Webinar Jam. Do you use that for the follow-up and for all that stuff, or do you do that in Infusionsoft? You probably use Infusionsoft.
Oh, the follow-up communication?
Yeah.
We use it for before the webinar, and then for posts we use Infusionsoft. But it is a very, I mean, what she's talking about is the email communication, like so when you register, you want to send an email immediately that confirms their registration, gives them details on how to log in, and then maybe sends them a reminder 15 minutes beforehand. They even have text messaging integrated into it, so if you want people to give their phone number, they can get a text reminder, which can increase your show-up rates. And then you can even do the follow-up as well. You can do follow-up messages as well after the webinar. And then what's really cool about that is then when you copy it all over, it copies over everything from your webinar registration page to the live page where people view the actual webinar, to the thank you pages, to all the email communications. So if you're doing it for external audiences, like I recommend, then you just copy it over, boom, you're done. Very fast. A lot faster than doing the other options over there. Yes, sir?
With your go-to meeting,
Yeah.
we haven't really seen the need to go up to the next level yet. Do you use the full webinar functionality, like the poll questions and all that stuff, or are you just using it to get access to the broader audience?
Oh, with GoToWebinar or with?
Oh, I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
familiar with the other software.
Yeah, I do use the poll. I like using polls, so I do.
What works best, like to get to your engagement up, or your best into webinar activity to get them to act at the other end, if you've got any insight?
I don't know that I can say that, if you have 5 polls in a webinar presentation that it'll increase your conversion percent by this, amount or anything like that. I just find that doing polls makes it a little bit more interactive, a little bit more engaging, and people are more and more expecting that sort of thing rather than just a disengaged. And the other thing people love, I'll get you into that. The other thing people love is just like acknowledgement. I didn't even really talk about that, but acknowledging people. So, always at the beginning, I will acknowledge people. If you have a lot of people registered, you can't acknowledge everyone, but you'll try to, ask where people are from and then call them out. Phil's here from Memphis, cool. And, oh yeah, someone from England, oh, very cool. Go through that for a couple of minutes. You'll get sometimes people bitching and moaning, a couple of people will complain about it. Forget it, do not listen to them, okay? People like to be acknowledged. So it's a great thing to do, yeah.
I was just wondering, what percentage of people who register do you find actually show up? And then also, do you send out like a recording if they couldn't make it or whatever? Can they,
Yeah.
listen to the recording?
So good and bad news. So show-up rates are going down with webinars. I've heard that 5 years ago, maybe more like 50%. Now maybe like 25 to 40%, depending on the audience. So that's the bad news. The good news is, hey, you're getting those people onto an email list anyways, okay? Like a lot of people are thinking like, I want to register for this. I might not be able to show up, but they're being added to your email list, which means you can communicate with them. They're giving you permission to communicate with them, and you can communicate with them again in the future. You can do things like text messages, which help to increase show-up rates, and sending email reminders. And the other thing is, just making sure it's a topic that people are really interested in. You can send emails beforehand that establish some social proof, that just kind of like, maybe it's an article where you were mentioned, you send that out to them beforehand. All this can be automated inside of Webinar Jam. Was there another question, or did I get all of them?
Do people go in and listen to it like a recording?
Yeah, so 99% of the time I send out a recording just because I find people are global and it's not really fair, and I'm sure that decreases my conversion rate because if you can increase your show-up rate, then that'll be more people present, then more people hearing your offer, more people more likely to buy. but I just find that most of the time I prefer to just send out a recording anyways, even if it decreases the show-up rate. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I play around with it just to see, and you will get a higher show-up rate if you don't send out a recording, yes.
What do you think is the perfect time for the webinar? I mean, perfect
Yeah.
length of the webinar.
Length of time? I'll answer both. So length of time, about an hour. You know, I usually do right around an hour, and then, but I'll say it's going to be 90 minutes, and then, you know, Q&A probably takes us through around 90 minutes. Some people sometimes ask me, like, could I do a 20-minute webinar? Well, I find that, you know, a lot of people haven't even gotten there in 10, 15 minutes. So like 10 or 15 minutes into your webinar is probably when your attendance will spike, will peak. So if you do a 20-minute webinar, then most of those people are going to miss most of the presentation. And most people these days kind of expect an hour-long presentation. As far as when to do it, really heavily depends on your market. So if it's an employee versus an entrepreneur, it's going to be totally different. If it's going to be young people, men, women, working moms, whatever, it completely varies. Generally, there's a company called On24 that is webinar software, and they do a report once a year on best practices. And they say Wednesday and Thursday, at least in the US, Wednesday and Thursday in the US, between 11 a.m. Pacific and 2 p.m. Pacific is peak time to do a webinar. 11, yeah, Wednesday and Thursday, yeah. Yes, sorry, you were in the back, sorry, and then I'll come to you in the pink shirt. I don't know the answer to all those. I mean, I know that, Grant, do you know, I mean, Webinar Ninja, last I checked, it didn't fully integrate with Infusionsoft. So, it does? Fully?
Webinar Jam?
No, Webinar Ninja. I know Webinar Ninja, I know Webinar Jam does. Webinar Ninja, I think it partially integrates with Infusionsoft, but it was a problem with, I'm sorry, so, Webinar Jam does integrate with Infusionsoft. I use Infusionsoft. I used Aweber before that. I use Infusionsoft with the Webinar Jam now. I'm not using Webinar Ninja at the moment because as far as I know, Infusionsoft doesn't fully integrate with Webinar Ninja. I don't know the answer on the other ones. I mean, this will integrate with everything. That one over there. Yes, sir.
Yeah, two questions. One is on questions during a webinar. What's your thoughts on like muting the audience and the chat? And the second question is, what about bringing a camera, video in? What's your thoughts on, you know, all slides and your voice versus having some video?
I've seen people do that. Bring in the just do it live. I had Michael Port do.
Be up in the corner sometimes. I think sometimes.
Yeah, some people do that. You can do that with GoToWebinar, I believe. GoToWebinar has that functionality. Zoom, I think, maybe also as well. So you could do that, and that's innovative. Look, if that's going to throw you off, then don't do it. You know, I mean, if it's going to distract you, if you're going to worry about what you look like, then don't do it. You know, keep it simple. You know, webinars are great for shy people because you're not standing in front of a room full of people. You're just speaking. You know, once you get used to it, then you're just speaking. You know, they're just hearing your voice, so you can do that as well. And what was the first part of your question?
Comments and questions, whether the audio.
I usually hold questions until the end, and as far as audio with people.
But do you have them? Let's say you have 150 people. If you turn on the audio and solicit questions, it can be a nightmare.
Oh, I don't take questions audibly. They put them in the chat. So I actually don't usually look at the chat either while it's going on. Sometimes I'll glance over a little bit because we want to make sure, like, there have been problems in the past where my internet goes down or some kind of, the other thing that can be distracting is that people are all over the globe. Some of them are going to be on a free coffee shop Wi-Fi, and they're going to be like, the sound just went down. Oh my God, your system is horrible. It's broken. Screw this guy. He's a fraud, you know. And you don't want to like look at that and you're like, oh my God, you know, kind of drive you crazy. So I try to not look at the chat because it will just completely, you know, that'll throw you off, you know. Yes, sir.
I'm a financial advisor. Most of my demographics are baby boomers. Do you find that baby boomers have a adversity to webinars, especially over any other age?
Not at all. No, they're people of all ages on webinars. I mean, I don't know what the statistics are, if there are certain, you know, demographics that are way more active on webinars or not, but no, I find, you know, just like people said that about Facebook a few years ago, like, right? And then like seniors are one of the, like, for the last couple of years have been fast growing demographic on Facebook. Yes, sir.
So he and I are both financial planners, specialized with military folks
So I haven't used Facebook Live for that purpose before, but what you're probably missing is getting them on an email list. So one of the things I didn't really mention here, one of the huge advantages of webinars is it's taking a web of tangential connections that you have on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter, you know, and on Pinterest, whatever, and it's bringing them, it's elevating them, it's escalating them closer and closer to becoming a client for you or a buyer or a customer. So, you know, Facebook Live, you can go and do that, but they don't have to register for that actual occurrence, right? So that's a bit of a disadvantage. Now, you could use something like a free ebook or something, or some kind of free offering during that presentation to try and get people onto an email list, but you know, not all of them are going to do it. The other thing is,
We could just say, sign up for our email list if you
want to hear about future ones?
of,
Sure.
as
Yeah. Right. Now the other disadvantage is if you're doing it for your own audience, you're not it's not going to grow your audience as much as if you're doing it for other external audiences. That's the other disadvantage. Yeah. Do we have? Yeah. And then you in the back.
Is there a sweet spot for waiting to start a webinar with respect to having late people show up and not having people who show up drop off because they don't want to stick around?
I just try and start within 1 to 2 minutes. If you start much later than that, then some people are going to get pissed.
Sure.
They will, yeah. So it totally varies. And this is why I don't recommend just getting started with Facebook ads if you don't have any experience in that space. You can blow through a ton of money very quickly. So like I gave you that screenshot of like 1,500 email subscribers. It's not unreasonable to spend $10 per acquisition. So that's $15,000, right? Wouldn't you rather spend a little bit of effort to get to know someone and have that come in for free rather than spending $15,000, you know? Or find a company out there. You know, there's probably a company that you are a customer of already. It might be a software or something like that that does customer acquisition webinars on a regular basis. And if you could come in and do a presentation for them that's relevant to them, I mean, picture this in your mind, like a marketing guy for this company that has to fill like a certain number of webinars every month for the next 6 months, and they're like, damn, I don't have anyone for November, jeez. All of a sudden, bam, your email pops in. Hey, I saw you do these webinars, and I have a training. It's on this. Would you be interested in having me do it? It's free. Sweet, you're scheduled. You know, you can build your email list very quickly if you find those types of opportunities, and you can find them all over the place. Yeah, other questions?
How do you find them again? I didn't hear you say that before.
As far as companies?
Yeah, how do you, people that are looking to fill webinars?
As far as companies go, I would look at any products that you use right now. Software products are big, SaaS services, software as a service. A lot of them do client acquisition webinars. Just going on Twitter and searching for webinar or hashtag webinar, hashtag personal finance or some other keyword. Oftentimes you can find old webinars or upcoming webinars that people have publicized on there. And then eventually, you just doing more and more of them and talking to people and asking around. I mean, here, like, I didn't do this at the pro networking thing, but you all should come back to the pro networking thing next year. Look at who's coming, what companies are coming, and see if any of them do webinars, do regular webinars. And then if they do, sign up in the pro networking thing to talk to them and see if they'd be interested in having you do a webinar for their audience.
Now, when they do that, do they opt into their page or do they opt in at your page? They manage their own list.
It depends. So
So can you
sometimes
actually build your list by their people opting in for their webinar?
can I build my list by? Sorry, you lost me on that one.
So if you're doing a webinar and you're going to their list and they're opting in for.
So the way it works is they would tell their people, their prospects, or their clients or customers about your webinar. Now, sometimes, when it's a software company or a larger company, there are pros and cons. So oftentimes they might not want to share the list, or they might, if you ask them, say, like, do you share the list? A lot of times they'll be like, oh, yeah, sure, absolutely. Sometimes they don't care. So if they don't care, then that's fine. sometimes they're fine with you hosting on your platform, so you could set up the registration page so it's clear, they're going to register for your list in that process. Other times they'll give you the list afterwards, and then you have to take the list and you have to import it into your list. If they won't give you the list, sometimes there have been kind of gray areas. So what I'll do is I will create a workbook, a guide, action guide, workbook/guide, action guide that they can follow along with. And I'll tell them before, and I'll be like, sometimes what I'll do is I'll create this workbook/guide, action guide, and people can download it, and I'll put it on one of the initial slides. And sometimes I get as many as a third of the people who are on there to download that, to opt in. Or sometimes I've even had places that are like, yeah, we can't give you the list. And I tell them about this idea. They're like, yeah, that's totally fine. And we'll email out to our list to tell them about that action guide.
Yeah, right.
So it's like, everyone's different. The other thing with companies is a lot of times they're trying to sell their software or their product or whatever, so they don't care about an affiliate commission. Now, we haven't even gotten into affiliate commissions here, talking about it really very much. But with these external webinars, the way you monetize them a lot of times is you give an affiliate commission to the person that you're doing the webinar for. But companies oftentimes don't even really care about affiliate commissions. Someone else has their hands up? Yes, sir. Sure, I can get it for you. Yeah.
Opt in for the guide, right?
You got to opt in first. No, okay. Yeah. Yes.
Will Webinar Jam integrate and embed in the lead pages?
Well,
Use the lead page, the
it's
webinar page that they have available?
it's kind of the other way around. So like you can use lead pages to set up a registration page. But, or you can use Webinar Jam's built-in templates for their registration page.
Okay.
So you can use them both if you want, or it's up to you.
So as far as delivering the call to action during your webinar, I've used Zoom, and it's very clunky to deliver any kind of link that someone can click on or something like that. I mean, you literally have to share it through the chat.
Yeah.
So does Webinar Jam give you a solution for being able to deliver a clickable call to action?
Yes, it does. They have, and that's not perfect either, but it's called offers, and it's on the right side. So you have like the video screen here, and it's on the right side. There's a couple of tabs, like there's the chat tab, and then they need to click on a different tab that'll be the offers tab. And if they click on that button, then it'll open up in a new window, whatever sales page or offer page or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
About like the affiliate, what would be expecting, like in terms of, like if they gave you access to their list, like what would they be expecting in return in terms of,
Yeah.
affiliate?
Typically, if it's a digital product or a digital course or something like that, it's typically 40 to 50% goes to the partner. If it's a service or coaching or consulting or done for you or something like that, then it's a different matter. Maybe more like 20%, but it could be negotiable. It really kind of depends. Or you don't have to share affiliate commissions. Sometimes you just do a webinar for someone's audience, they do a webinar for your audience, and that's it. It's a great way to grow your list. You got 100 people on an email list, someone else has 100 people on your email list, you do a webinar for each other, you work your way up. Yeah. So you're doing a poll afterwards, after the webinar? What's the purpose of the poll? Okay, yeah, so that's a great one. So I usually do that after a couple of days later. I send an email just saying, hey, can I get some feedback on this webinar? And I have them driven into a Google Drive form, so it can be copied over and over again, and all the answers go into the same document. So I'm doing basically the same similar webinar over and over again, so all the answers go in the same place. You do the same thing, by the way, with an email prior to the webinar, where you ask people to survey what questions they have for the webinar. So you're getting a ton of market research from this on the back end and the front end. On the front end, you're getting what questions they have. So you make sure that your presentation is really aligned with what questions people have. And it gives you a bunch of questions that you can use if people aren't asking questions. We've had a lot of great questions here, but sometimes when you know, in any particular audience of people, there are more people who want to hear answers to questions than are willing to ask those questions. So sometimes it's crickets, like there's 100 people on live, no one's asking any questions. I will just go to those questions and say, like, here's some questions that we've gotten, and I'll just read off the answers because I know people are wondering what the answers are.